400 U.S. surface-to-air missiles were stolen from Libya during Benghazi attack and are now in the hands of Al-Qaeda, claims whistleblower. This is a video that someone had sent me, and I see it in article form, which is a little bit better. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. I believe it was Fox. And of course they had some shill from the State Department come on there and basically water it all down, saying, oh, there's nothing going on here, no need to stop and look into this, just keep doing what you're doing. 400 American surface-to-air missiles were taken from Libya during the terror attacks on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. A former U.S. attorney who represents whistleblowers claimed on Monday. He added that the intelligence community is terrified that it might be used to shoot down airliners. So, like with the State Department representative, I can't remember what his name is. I've never seen or heard of him before. But he wouldn't acknowledge any of these things. And then, of course, the person that's this whistleblower saying, well, it could be a possible terrorist attack. So, again, it builds up how they were shutting down embassies and stuff to build up the fear factor and build up kind of a pre-false flag environment. So the funny thing, though, is that nobody's mentioning this. They're stating the obvious, but then at the same time, they're backtracking. That's what's so frustrating when I see that stuff like on Fox. He's not even admitting that the CIA was arming the terrorists. But they're saying that they're stolen. Now that's the key thing, right? Because CIA spies smuggle 14 Stinger missiles into Syria so rebels can take out regime warplanes. This is back August 2012, so a year ago. There you go. The ground-air weapons have been delivered across the Turkish border and were partly paid for by Saudi Arabia and I'm sure Qatar. But I've been mentioning for a while now that Libya, because this is where he says they were stolen from Libya or taken from or just transferred from, is that Libya is a nice little smuggling base or home for the intelligence communities who are creating this destabilization in the Middle East and in Africa. Speaking of Africa and smuggling weapons, Sudan becomes the newest player in Syria's protracted conflict. The Sudanese government has been selling Chinese and local-made weapons to the Arab Gulf state of Qatar, which in turn has been shipping it to the rebels in Syria. So Western official says Sudan's clandestine participation in arming the rebels or terrorists, whatever word you prefer, in Syria suggests inherent tensions in Bashir's foreign policy, which broadly supports Sunni Islamists, which is, Saudi, Qatar, Gulf states movements, while maintaining a valued relationship with the Shia theocracy in Iran. I like how they put that, just a side note, because if you think about it, the United States is no more democratic than Iran. Iran may even have more representation as far as a real electoral process and less corrupted process than, say, the United States or these democratic nations that are bombing people in the name of democracy. Really, in the U.S. we have, kind of a corporatism, so nothing really changes in either, right? Al-Qaeda faction in Syria hands out Teletubbies and Spiderman dolls. An Al-Qaeda allied group in Syria has enlisted Tinky Winky in its fight for hearts and minds of Syrians. One of the Al-Qaeda's fatal mistakes in Iraq during the war was alienating the Iraqi people who turned against the group that had killed so many civilians and imposed severe Islamist rule. So now all factions are pushing into Syria. They're endeavoring to project a softer, fuzzier image. For example, in Aleppo, in rebel-controlled part of the town, they have ice cream eating contests and sermons about jihad. So I say some of this is a bit surprising for a group dedicated to a total war against Western culture. Well, this whole thing is fuzzy in itself because these people, these Al-Qaeda factions, really are working to the benefit of the Zionists and to the Western powers that are, quote, fighting them. I mean, their enemies are their friends. That's who's aiding them. So, I mean, they pinned 9/11 on bin Laden, and he had ties with the Bush family, El Busto, whatever. Basically, he had financial ties to the Bush family, and he was rich. He came from a rich family himself. So, it's like that movie. I believe it was The Good Shepherd when he's talking about to the first head of the CIA, Matt Damon's character in England, where he's saying things that appear to be fuzzy are actually very clear, and things that are clear are actually diluted. And he's talking about propaganda and interpreting it. So we've covered about the abductions going on with the Syrian rebels or terrorists, and in particular this Italian priest that was trying to broker peace between the different factions there. The Italian priest has been killed by the Syrian militants, says the UK-based monitoring group. So they've killed the Italian priest who disappeared in the east of the Arab country late last month. My website is Global Government News. That's what it's called. News for the North American Union and beyond. My domain name, or the address, is ggnonline.net, and I fixed the link in the YouTube's video description. So if you'd like to go and visit it, the link should work now. That was actually my own fault because I had a HTTP and I didn't have www, so I just assumed that it would work. Alright, moving on here. Syrian opposition calls for a unified rebel army. Head of the National Coalition says united force under command of Free Syrian Army Chief Staff needs to resume order. This is a leader of the opposition, basically the terrorists who have this Syrian National Coalition. Now, these guys represent oil companies and Western oligarchs, basically, is what they do. So, has called for the creation of a unified rebel army that works under the command of the Free Syrian Army. So again, this is Al Jazeera, so they're going to spread more bullshit, which is the rules of the game have changed after the involvement of the Lebanese Hezbollah movement in the Syrian conflict. Well, that's not actually true, like trying to drag Iran into it. Really, Hezbollah is just trying to maintain their sovereignty and all the crap that these people are creating, people that, you know, are backing him and that, backing their play, like El Barati in Egypt, who just resigned because they're, you know, it's bloodshed and he's getting the hell out of there. They're not getting what they want right now, so they just get destabilization. But like in Libya, but my point is that they're having spillover from Syria into Lebanon. They like to play this narrative about, you know, there are a number of Hezbollah fighters inside Syria, so then they can blame Iran and drag Iran into it. He said a rebel terrorist force is needed that includes the elite so we can deal with groups that infiltrate Syria, like the same groups that he's talking about, maybe, who are 90% foreigners. So this is the kicker right here. This is what told me everything, what this article is about. There is chaos, right? It's chaotic, right? The terrorists have taken control of big areas. There is chaos in the eastern areas, and there's chaotic selling of oil. That's right. I even heard that from the Syrian news. They're talking about this, about the terrorists are taking oil, and they're trying to smuggle it into Turkey, and they're getting caught doing it, or quote, caught. But that's what they're doing, right? Right now, what you're seeing is people like him that represent big oil companies in Western countries. They want to get control of the oil, like in Iraq and Libya and other places, control the resources and start, siphoning it off so it doesn't actually go back into back to the people, right? They give the whole crap, the whole proposal about, oh, it's going to bring, it's going to bring jobs and it's going to trickle down to the masses. But yeah, the point of this article is they're showing that the problem right now is like I said, these rebels, these terrorists, are working for these corporations. They're working for the corporate, basically figureheads like this guy and that, who are going to go in there and divvy up contracts for the resources after they overthrow a sovereign nation such as Syria. And I like to call it a civil war, an uprising. A lot more kosher to say that than to just call it what it is, which is an invasion by foreign mercenaries backed by people like this who are represented by Goldman Sachs and Lockheed Martin, who put them into office. It's funny American people think that they put them in office. That's pretty hilarious to me. Obama's confused Syria policy. You're either pro-anti-Assad or pro-anti-rebel. He says that they say here that his policy is fundamentally one of contradictions. Again, it's not his policy. It's basically private think tanks and corporations. But it goes on here. It says a professor from the University of Oklahoma, an expert on Syria, wrote back at the time in 2011, let's be clear, Washington is pursuing regime change by civil war in Syria. So it goes in there. It says that they didn't welcome the fall of the regime in Damascus either. They said that they support the Syrian opposition on the margins of its utmost importance to maintain the functions of the state so as to avoid a power vacuum that the Al-Qaeda-linked jihadists that make up the majority of the rebels could take advantage of. You see how this is all working? The Nation's author, or writer, journalist Robert Dreyfuss put it, we're backing the same guys in Syria that were fighting in Iraq against American soldiers. We just covered this. The Wall Street Journal reported the CIA's second-in-command, Mike Morrell, said in an interview that the top threat to the U.S. security is the risk that the Syrian government, which possesses chemical and other weapons, collapses and the country becomes an Al-Qaeda haven. In the short term, probably the best outcome in that respect would be a prompt reestablishment of control by the Assad regime. Iraqi Kurdistan welcoming but overwhelmed by Syrian refugees. Iraq's autonomous Kurdistan region has tried best to deal with the huge influx of war refugees from across the border in Syria, including Turkey. I think it was like 500,000 as well. But they're all around too, even in Iraq and Jordan a lot. But its young government does not have the experience or structure to deal with such a crisis and is simply overwhelmed, according to the UN. Kurdistan just started pumping oil as well here. And that's what you got to keep an eye on, Kurdistan, during this whole thing. Are they going to try to create a proxy state for the West? Pools of blood in Cairo streets as Egypt's military attacks sit-ins. So, scores reported dead as Egyptian military violently clears pro-Morsi sit-ins with tear gas and gunfire. So, death toll is continuing to rise on Wednesday. So, it says here that they tasked the armed forces, the military appointed interim president, in cooperation with the police, which maintain the monetary system, to take all necessary measures to maintain security and order. Sounds all nice and everything, you know, nice and civil, right? To protect public and private property. That's government infrastructure, and that's corporations. And the lives of citizens, right? You see, like how that's at the end? But basically, the associates, the workers, the slaves who work for those companies. Following the brutal assault on the Egyptian protest camps, the U.S. is considering calling off a military exercise with Egypt. Well, that's probably not the whole... See, smoke and mirrors, right? They weren't really there for a military exercise. Maybe they were, but they were really there to maintain a presence in Egypt. If their little baby falls, their little coup that they don't want to call it, it doesn't take place successfully, which is why I think you even saw in InfoWars they had like some kind of graphic about how there was a warship sent to Bahrain for those protests there, you know, the whole region. But Al Jazeera is reporting, and quoting the Ministry of Health, that 278 people were killed and 2,000 injured. Egypt's interim vice president resignation amid deadly crackdown. So there you go. Al-Baradi has announced his resignation after the crackdown by security forces. He basically says it's difficult for him to continue bearing responsibility for decisions that I do not agree with, whose consequences I fear I cannot bear the responsibility for one drop of blood. Well, he already has. He's just getting out of there because now it's starting to get really bad, and it's not changing for the better, which is, quote, order. Yeah. In other words, he's just a shill puppet who's there to collect a lot of money. But he's not willing to get killed over it. 278 dead in Egypt clashes. So John Kerry delivers warning and surprise appearance at State Department. Basically stating the obvious here, but he goes on here and says the path towards violence leads to only greater instability and economic disaster. So it's about losing profits. That's what, except for oil, probably see an oil spike, which again boosts the dollar. Students offer grants if they tweet pro-Israeli propaganda. So in a campaign to improve its image abroad, Israeli government plans to provide scholarships to hundreds of students at its several universities in exchange for their making pro-Israel Facebook posts and tweet to foreign audiences. And Tunisia is back in the news. Tunisian secularist and Islamist and rival rallies and no clashes. Around 40,000 secularists rallied in Tunis on Tuesday to call for the departure of the Islamist-led ruling coalition, but there were no reported clashes, with another demonstration by thousands of Islamists elsewhere in the Tunisian capital. So Tunisia's government is led by moderate Islamists, is grappling with secularists calling for a resignation. Again, this was kind of imposed on them during the Arab Spring, and it goes on here. It says that this situation could drift towards an Egyptian scenario in which disgruntled secular opposition topples an elected Islamist-led government. They could say Western pushed elected government. And same thing in Mali happened, and they used the Tuaregs to get the peace to drive out these terrorists. I think the point was to get the Tuaregs out of the equation, as far as them gaining their independence or autonomy. But Mali's new president faces Tuareg challenge. Many voters say they want Qaeda, who is widely known to take an uncompromising position, as they blame the separatists for creating Mali's political disaster. It says here that in the March 2012 coup, a power vacuum allowed al-Qaeda-linked militants to take hold in northern Mali. See, again, that was the point. That was the point. Basically, these Tuaregs were saying that they wanted autonomy. Then all of a sudden, these al-Qaeda-linked militants showed up, and then the Tuaregs from the north fought with the Malian government to get them out of there. Then they held the elections, and then the Tuaregs said, well, elections aren't going to really do much as far as stabilization. Yeah, see, it's talking about a voter. He should not negotiate, the president, that is, with the Tuaregs, because the people should respect the law and Mali will not be divided. They just want their autonomy, you know? It's GGN. Thank you.